Photography is a window to the past, a single moment frozen in silver halide. These images capture truth. They are permanent records of who was there and what happened. Old photographs serve as proof. They document reality. They preserve faces that would otherwise be forgotten. They hold memories that would fade with time. But what occurs when a photograph presents an impossibility? What happens when the record itself cannot be explained? What do we do when a photograph, a supposed document of truth, shows us something that should not exist? A recent archival project by the university's archive department focused on the Regional Historical Asylum. The centerpiece was a group photograph from 1911. It showed staff and patients gathered on the asylum's front lawn. The original glass plate negative was discovered in a local historical society's collection. It had been mislabeled for decades. The plate was in poor condition. Years of improper storage had taken their toll. The emulsion was faded. The surface was covered in dust. Chemical stains had spread across portions of the image, but the potential was there. The image could be saved. The restoration team consisted of 2 dedicated professionals. Whalen served as the project head. He had 20 years of experience in archival work. Cameron was the imaging specialist. He understood the technical aspects of photographic restoration. Their goal was simple. They would clean the plate. They would stabilize it. They would digitize the image for the university's permanent record. The process would take months of careful work. But both men were committed to excellence. The process began with a high-resolution scan. The glass plate was positioned under specialized equipment. Every detail was captured. Dust was removed carefully using digital tools. Scratches were eliminated pixel by pixel. Chemical stains were treated with precision. The work was painstaking. It required patience. It required skill. Slowly, faces began to emerge from the haze of a century. Features became clear. Expressions became visible. The photograph was coming back to life. The restoration proved successful. The clarity was astonishing. Details that had been invisible for decades suddenly appeared. Individual faces could be distinguished. Clothing could be examined. The background became sharp. Whalen expressed his satisfaction with the results. The university would have an exceptional addition to its collection. But Cameron flagged an issue during the final review. In the back row stood a man. He was positioned slightly apart from the others. His placement seemed deliberate. The technician's cursor hovered over the figure. The man was not wearing a staff uniform. He was not wearing patient attire either. His clothing was completely different from everyone else in the photograph. Cameron made a simple request to Whalen. He asked if Whalen could find out who this person was. It seemed like a routine question. Every person in an archival photograph should be identified when possible. This was standard practice. This was good scholarship. Neither man expected what would happen next. This simple question would begin a months-long investigation. The team quickly realized something disturbing. This man was present in the photo. The evidence was clear, but he had no source. No record explained his presence. No document confirmed his existence. He was, according to all available records, a ghost on the glass. He existed in the photograph, but nowhere else. This was unprecedented in Whalen's career. To understand the mystery, the location must be examined first. The Regional Historical Asylum existed in a different time. In 1911, it was not a modern hospital. The institution was overcrowded. Patients lived in cramped conditions. It was understaffed. A handful of nurses managed dozens of patients. It operated under the pseudoscientific theories of that era. Treatments were harsh. Diagnoses were often incorrect. Record-keeping was inconsistent at best. Paperwork was frequently incomplete. Files were misfiled or lost. It was a place where people could easily get lost. The poor were especially vulnerable. Transient individuals could vanish in the bureaucratic shuffle. Families sometimes abandoned relatives there. Those without families had no one to ask questions. This context made the mystery plausible. It explained how someone could be present but undocumented. Wayland's first step was to confirm the anomaly existed on the original negative. Perhaps the figure was a result of digital processing. Perhaps Cameron had made an error. The team re-examined the glass plate under magnification. They studied it carefully. The figure was there. He was clearly visible on the original plate. He was not a digital artifact. He was not a water stain. He was not a chemical blotch. He was not a scratch that resembled a person. He had been standing in front of the camera when the photograph was taken. This was physical evidence. This was irrefutable. The investigation began in earnest. The team needed to identify everyone else in the photo first. This would provide context. This would establish a baseline. They used asylum admission ledgers. These thick volumes contained entries for every patient. They consulted staff rosters. These listed everyone employed by the institution. They examined census data from 1911. This provided information about the surrounding community. One by one, names were assigned to faces. The head nurse was identified. Her stern expression matched descriptions in asylum reports. The groundskeeper was found. His weathered face appeared in other institutional photos. Several long-term patients were cross-referenced using their admission files. Their physical descriptions matched perfectly. After weeks of careful work, nearly every person in the 50-person photograph had been identified. The process was tedious, it was exhausting, but it was thorough. All except one person had been accounted for. The mystery man presented a unique problem. He did not appear in any staff roster for 1910, 1911, or 1912. The lists were complete. They were detailed. His name was simply not there. He did not appear in the patient admission logs. Every entry had been checked. Every name had been verified. He did not appear in the visitor's logbook for the entire spring and summer of 1911. This was the presumed time frame of the photo. Visitors were required to sign in. The logs were preserved. His name did not exist in them. Wayland noted the profound frustration of the situation. It was not simply that they did not know who he was. It was that they could not prove he had ever existed at all. He was present in the photograph, but absent from history. Wayland decided to expand the search. He brought in Brooks, an expert on the county's history. Brooks had spent 40 years researching the region. He had access to different records. These included town directories. These listed residents and their occupations. They included local newspapers. These documented daily life and events. They included genealogical archives. These tracked families through generations. The historian searched for any mention of the asylum on that particular day. Was there an event? Was there a public visit? Was there a government inspection? Any of these could explain an unknown visitor. The newspapers for 1911 were largely silent. There was only a brief mention of the asylum's annual budget. Nothing more. No special events were recorded. No visits were documented. The silence was deafening. Brooks identified the likely photographer. His name was Andrew. He was an itinerant artist who traveled the state. He documented public institutions for postcards and state reports. His work was well known. His images appeared in government publications. A theory emerged. Could the mystery man be Andrew's assistant? Photographers often traveled with help, someone to carry equipment, someone to prepare the plates, someone to manage the logistics. This seemed like a strong lead. The team searched for other photos taken by Andrew. They found his estate collection. It was housed at a museum 2 counties away. They examined every image carefully. They studied faces. They looked for patterns. They found photos of Andrew himself. They found photos of his known assistants. Documentation existed for 3 different men who worked with him. None of them matched the man in the asylum photo. The lead was a dead end. The team explored a different possibility. Perhaps there had been a technical failure. Glass plate photography was complex. The process was difficult to master. Chemicals had to be mixed correctly. Exposure times had to be precise. Development required skill. Could the image be a double exposure? Perhaps Andrew had accidentally exposed the plate twice, once at the asylum, once somewhere else entirely. This would create a ghost image. It would place a person in a location where they never stood. Whalen contacted Amara, a forensic imaging expert. She had worked with law enforcement. She had analyzed historical photographs for authentication. She had the skills needed. Amara analyzed the light and shadows within the image file. She studied the angles. She measured the intensity. She compared different areas of the photograph. The lighting on the mystery man was perfectly consistent. It matched the lighting on the people standing next to him. The sun was in the same position for all figures. The shadows he cast fell in the same direction as everyone else. The shadow length matched those nearby. The conclusion was clear. He was not an artifact. He was not a technical error. He had been physically standing there when the shutter opened. He was real. The investigation reached a standstill. The man existed only in this single photograph. Weeks had passed. Resources were being consumed. The team was no closer to an answer. Cameron, the technician who first noticed him, became obsessed with the man's appearance. He studied the figure for hours. He zoomed in on the figure repeatedly. He enhanced different aspects of the image. The man's suit was dark. It was well tailored. The cut was precise. The fit was excellent. It appeared to be of much higher quality than the staff uniforms. Those were plain and utilitarian. He wore a dark tie. It was narrow and formal. He wore a distinct lapel pin. Its shape was visible but small, but the resolution was not high enough to make out the pin's design. Even with maximum enhancement, the details remained unclear. His expression was also different from the others. The patients and staff looked posed. Their expressions were blank. They looked tired. They looked resigned. Many stared at nothing. The mystery man was looking almost directly at the lens. His gaze was focused. His expression appeared faint but confident. He seemed aware. He seemed present. He seemed to know exactly where he was and why. Whalen sent the enhanced image of the man's attire to Melanie, a clothing historian. She specialized in early 20th century fashion. She could date clothing by its construction. She could identify social class by fabric choice. Melanie provided a detailed analysis of what she observed. The cut of the suit was examined. She noted the specific style. The high-gorge lapels were noted. These were fashionable in that era. The narrow tie was consistent with fashion from the 1910 to 1912 period. Everything matched the time frame perfectly. However, Melanie noted something important. This was a formal suit. It was not everyday wear. Working men did not dress this way. Even middle-class professionals wore simpler clothing. It was the kind of suit a man of means would wear. A businessman, perhaps. A banker, possibly. Or perhaps an undertaker would wear such clothing. Funeral directors dressed formally. It was part of their profession. This observation opened a new line of inquiry. It was a morbid possibility, but it had to be explored. The team checked county coroner's records. They wanted to know if there had been a death at the asylum that day. Deaths were common in such institutions. Disease spread quickly. Accidents happened. They checked the asylum's own mortality logs. These were kept separately from admission records. There was a death recorded in the same week the photo was estimated to have been taken. A patient had died. The cause was listed as pneumonia. A new theory emerged. Could this man be a mortician? Perhaps he had come to collect a body. Perhaps he was simply asked to step into the photo. Perhaps he was there on business. Brooks checked the business records for all local undertakers from 1911. 2 businesses were found. Both had operated for years. Photographs of the owners were even located. These came from business advertisements. Neither of them was the man in the photo. The faces did not match. The ages were wrong. The trail went cold again. The university's archive department had exhausted all conventional leads. Months had passed. The investigation had consumed significant time. Other projects were waiting. Whalen was forced to finalize the archive entry for the photograph. The team faced a professional dilemma. It was also a historical dilemma. Their job was to document. Their job was to provide accurate information. They had identified 49 people, but the 50th person was a complete unknown. How do you catalog what you cannot explain? How do you document what has no source? The team realized something profound. The mystery could not be solved. The records simply were not there. The man was an anomaly that defied explanation. He existed in the space between documentation and reality. Brooks provided what would become the final resolution. The historian pointed to a crucial event from the past. In the winter of 1912, a fire broke out. It occurred in the asylum's administrative wing. The blaze started at night. It spread quickly through the wooden structure. The main patient and staff files had survived. These were stored in a stone building. These were the ones the team had already checked. But the fire destroyed all transient records. Temporary employment files were lost. The asylum hired day laborers regularly. Maintenance workers came and went. Short-term committal papers were destroyed. Some patients were held only for observation. Their stays lasted days, not years. Maintenance contracts were gone forever. Agreements with outside vendors vanished. Delivery records burned. This was the moment everything changed. This explained the gap. The team reached a conclusion about the mystery man. He must be in that lost file. Logic demanded this explanation. He was likely a temporary worker. Perhaps he was a mason. The asylum was always under repair. Perhaps he was an electrician hired for a single day. The institution was installing new lighting, or he could have been a patient committed for a 48-hour observation. Families sometimes requested brief evaluations. His file would have been destroyed before it was ever made permanent, before it was ever transferred to the main archive. This was the most logical explanation. It was non-supernatural. It was grounded in historical fact. The man's source was not missing. It had been burned. History itself was imperfect. The record was broken. Not everything survives. Not everything can be known. The case was officially closed. The archive entry was written. It included a note. It read, "One unidentified male, presumed temporary worker, records lost in 1912 fire." The investigation had reached its end. The university accepted the conclusion. It was reasonable. It was scholarly. It was defensible. But something about the conclusion felt incomplete. Something nagged at the team. The image itself remained unchanged. Cameron's observations lingered in everyone's mind. The expensive suit was still there. It did not look like workers' clothing. The confident stare was still present. It did not look like a patient's vacant gaze. The fact that he stood just apart from everyone else remained notable. His positioning seemed deliberate. His isolation seemed meaningful. The fire explained the lack of records. This was logical. This was reasonable. Historical documents are destroyed all the time, but it did not explain the man himself. It did not explain his expensive clothing. Why would a temporary laborer dress so formally? It did not explain his penetrating gaze. Why did he look so confident? Why did he seem so aware? These details continued to trouble the team. These questions had no answers. The 1911 asylum photograph became one of the university archive department's most requested items. Researchers asked to see it constantly. Graduate students wrote papers about it. Undergraduate students studied it in history courses. The public was fascinated by it. Articles appeared in local newspapers. Blog posts spread the story. Social media amplified the mystery. It served as a powerful reminder of something important. People look to history for answers. They want certainty. They want facts. They want to know what happened. But sometimes all history provides are better questions. Sometimes the past refuses to speak. Sometimes the documents are silent. The photograph had been restored to perfect clarity. The team had done excellent work. Every technical aspect was flawless. But the restoration only revealed an unsolvable mystery. The mystery was permanent. It sat at the very center of the image. It stared out at viewers with confident eyes. Questions remained about the 50th man on the asylum lawn. Was he a lost patient whose records vanished in flames? Was he a government official on an unrecorded visit? Was he just a man in a good suit who was in the wrong place at the right time? Was he a concerned family member who came to check on a relative? Was he a journalist investigating conditions? Was he a traveling salesman who happened to be there? The possibilities were endless. The answer may never be known. The photograph continues to raise these questions. It continues to challenge assumptions about what can be known. It continues to remind us that the past keeps its secrets. Some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. Some figures in history will always stand apart, and sometimes the clearest image only makes the shadows deeper.